welcome to Night Chat Podcast starring Paul Seattle, Frank Seattle, and the Redneck Christopher Shea! Producer Peter Overger extraordinaire, we got a camera there, that's me. And today we have a great topic led by Paul Seattle.
Yes, sir.
Nice. I like that.
I gotta give it to him. I can't even. I'm gonna let that fly.
That was good. That greeting was perfect.
That was excellent, I have to say. And on top of that, before we begin, guys, please continue to like, share, and subscribe. Most importantly, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We really appreciate all of your commentary and support. So, now that Peter Oberg has set the tone properly for today's episode,
Ooh, this must be a good one.
It's something I was posed a question. At least I should say I'm posed this question a lot.
Now, by pose, do you mean this type of pose?
No. Okay. We're not looking for, you look like Sagittarius or whatever. They're not
Half
both
horse,
there.
half.
Yeah.
The village people.
Yes. Well, being the BOD.
Really, with that haircut, your comment? Dude, look at it.
No,
Look at how nice this is.
he's got a haircut like a man.
Chris Shea, manly of most men, purveyor of gummy dicks.
I ain't gonna lie, they're good.
Tour guide of the
I will go to any bachelorette party now and eat gummy dicks. I don't care.
He's gonna have a straw. It's just us girls. Let's share some secrets.
The BOD.
Let's share some secrets.
We should get you a shirt.
BOD has spoken. So with that, I'm posed this question a lot. And I was asked again, legitimately, last week.
How our friendship remains?
No, I'm astonished. That's like
every 3 hours.
that's like you're gonna see that on like a Lifetime channel or something. But I'm asked on a routine basis, on a routine basis about what is the legitimate or the proper age of children to start to start training, lifting weights, etc., etc. And the answer has a lot of different variables. So the first variable is, or I should say, let me back up. Kids can train at any age. It's dependent upon what your goals are, what you're trying to accomplish, the level.
But I think you would argue that the type of training that can be
It
done.
varies also.
Yes, it varies. But what I'm getting to that is that the main variable also has to do with the physicality of the child, whether it's male or female. Okay. Some kids, you see them 7th and 8th grade, they look like men already. Okay. Some 7th and 8th grade, they haven't hit puberty. They're small. They're still childlike. They may be operating at a high athletic level, right? They're training, whatever, but physically they haven't hit that stride yet. So how do you train that child versus the one that is more physically mature? You train them completely different.
Absolutely.
Because it's a hormonal and a physical thing, right? So it's a pubescent thing. It's a matter of okay, what can they tolerate, what can they not tolerate? And I think the major issue with that is that that parents, not so much coaches, but parents, it's the age-old over-evaluating their child. And they do it with that as well, okay? Just because Johnny, okay, is already lifting weights, okay, and Billy is not, there's a reason behind that. And the reason behind that is because Johnny is already an alpha predator at 12 or 13 years old, and Billy is still a little boy, okay? So you're not going to train them the same way. You're not going to program them the same way until that physical maturity starts to catch up or starts to level out. So that is the main reason and the main variable as to when you determine when it happens. Prior to that, every kid, every student athlete at the youth level can do tons of plyometrics, tons of calisthenics. They can jog, they can sprint, they can do band work, okay? They can do light dumbbell work, body weight exercise, exactly.
Why do you
dips,
think we got
pull-ups.
away from that? I mean, back in the 50s, 60s, I mean,
Sure.
that was like a huge push towards that whole, like...
Well, I think the country as itself was more physically fit then, too. I mean, so it wasn't a matter of getting away from it. Remember, today's youth are sitting home, the youths are sitting home playing video games and becoming obese. So they're not out there playing football, baseball, kickball,
Pickup games in the yard,
dodgeball,
exactly.
stickball. They're not out there. It's from dusk till dawn, from dawn till dusk rather, doing those things and being physically active. So now you take in the sense like, right, the big thing now is everyone is, either you're specializing in a sport or you're playing multiple sports, and now, as it wasn't when we were growing up, people know now that you have to train. That you have to train in the weight room. You have to train in speed and agility. You have to do all these things, no matter what your sport is. This isn't about
to be successful.
Yes, this isn't about any particular sport. It's about training. And when parents come and they ask that question, or another athlete asks that question, it's always the same. And that's the biggest caveat is, well, why is he or she doing it, and why isn't he or she doing it? That's the main reason. Main reason is there's a clear separation of church and state from a physical and really emotional, mental aspect too, at that point.
What I'd like to do as a parent, and asking you as a professional, what is the correct age? Well, maybe there's not an exact date, obviously, but for a kid to start doing lifting and things like that.
Well,
Like what's, obviously when they're
Yeah.
small, they're not going to do that.
Right.
So what's...
Well, I don't. It's
not
not
an
necessarily about size.
It's situational.
It's situational, and it's also about
Physical
physicality.
maturity.
Like, listen, I'll use my little guy for example. Right? He's been strength training for years now. We just started letting him lift weights in the last 4 months.
And how old is he?
13. But he's also on the other end of the spectrum, where my oldest was much more physically mature than he was at that age, and was lifting weights way before that, because he was just a bigger, stronger kid at that point. He physically hit puberty and so on. So now, where my little guy is coming into that now, we just started doing squats. We just started doing bench press with a barbell. We just started doing all this stuff because he's ready for it at this point. Prior to that, we didn't do much of it. A lot of it was resistive stuff with bands and with body weight stuff and pull-ups and dips and all that other fun stuff. But now he has worked his way to that, and it took a couple of years.
Well, you have your kids, you've seen a few generations, you have kids that you work with here.
Sure.
You've seen, through the years, so many different kids at these ages and grow. Do you think that there's something else to it, that these kids are progressing later? Or, like, is it maybe what's in the, because some might argue like it's the diet or what's in the food. Kids aren't
They're more
getting into.
precocious.
Yeah.
Well, I think that there's a big answer to that question.
Because I know
I
society too is also feminizing the male.
But I feed
I
my
wanna-
kids the chicken with the steroids in it. We want the pro hormones. I don't look for that organic shit.
That's Paul's line.
No, I'm just
Thank
using
you,
too,
Peter.
I like it.
Thank you. Yeah.
You are not nice to me.
Well, he's
And
right.
the haircut and everything,
Haircuts looks great. So, but to continue on with what we're saying,
Add something.
yeah.
I'm not. And gummy dicks. That's what I feed my fucking kids. Chicken with hormones
And gummy dicks.
and gummy dicks. That's all we eat. That's a staple.
Bags of gummy dicks.
So the thing is, to Frank's point, I love it. The thing is, to Frank's point,
goes the teaser.
is that yes, I agree with some of what you're saying, but again, the most important part of that also is at home. We've talked about this in previous podcasts. Okay, parents out there, you don't get it. You do not know what it takes to win. You do not know what discipline is. You do not know what it is to sacrifice. You don't. And it's a team effort. So if your kid, your child, your son, your daughter isn't putting weight on, that's on you. Period. If they're not eating properly, that's because they're watching you eat like garbage. Okay? If you're not training and you want to know why your son or daughter's lazy, it's because you are lazy. Period. That's kind of where it works. And at the end of the day, coaches can only go so far with what you're doing. Because if it's not a full gamut process with every intangible person involved, it's not going to happen. So that's where the over-evaluation process comes into the point. Well, how come, like I said, how come Johnny can bench press but Billy can't now? Johnny can bench press because Johnny's got a full beard. Okay?
And leg hair.
Yeah. And Billy, okay, is still wearing underoos. All right? So there's a big difference. And if you can't evaluate that and understand that, and you don't need to be a doctor or an athlete like me, okay? You don't have to have any of that experience to understand that. A normal person with common sense, okay, understands that. So,
You can almost look at the child and determine
Heck
are they
yeah.
ready for it or not.
Well, how did you determine? So, like, I was always big at a young age.
Right, so
you
you-
actually started having me lift when I was younger.
yeah, well, you were a man. I
But-
mean, there's difference.
My physicality-wise, definitely, but mentally, I would argue I was not.
Right.
So, like,
And even the
It's-
small genitalia.
and it's
Still an argument.
well, it fits in the bag of dicks. So, if you, I just caught that one. Sorry.
I slipped it in.
So
I
it's
didn't hear
nice. Is that-
I'm sure it was the tag
Is
against
that how
me,
you always
'cause that's
slip
all we do now.
So, like,
He's not on my team anymore.
when you have that situation where you have someone who's physically inclined to do it, but
Right.
not mentally inclined, would you approach it differently versus someone who is physically and mentally?
I think that if they are physically prepared to do it, you have to teach them mentally, this is what it takes. So you're never going to get, it's very rare that they are dialed in at the same time,
Sure.
okay? I can tell you, my oldest has always been dialed in, but he's never been more dialed in until the last 6 months. Like, to the point where his mother and I are like, fucking kid's dialed in. You know, like, you've made comments.
Well, I
to me,
told
like-
him, I'm like, you need to start fucking up a
Yeah.
little bit. I need your parents
Yeah.
to feel like they need me here in the
Yeah.
summertime while they're gone.
Right.
You know, because
Right.
I
But my point is, like, he's,
I need a place to stay.
but again, this is what I've spent his lifetime trying to teach him. But also with him, he was able to lift weights much younger because he was physically
developed.
bigger kid. He physically could do it. Paolo, no. It's just now it's happening. And he's been a high-level athlete for a long time.
Yeah.
But what about,
So, but, you know,
what about advice like you hear people say, don't start them too young because it'll stunt their growth?
that is a wives' tale. There is no statistical information that is accurate about that. There's nothing you will read in a journal that will do that.
But also hear
It
what
has
he's saying.
Nothing to do with it. That's
He-
a wives' tale.
This is why I brought up the whole what kind of training in the beginning.
No, I understand that, but I was curious. No, that makes total sense. But I was curious, like in terms of advice for people, because we're getting into like a lot of things.
Right.
And a lot of the
Because
uneducated
I've
people.
always heard it stunts your growth.
Oh, it's
Like
wrong.
he has kids lifting weights.
Yeah.
He doesn't have 13-year-old kids power lifting.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Correct.
So I think when you see like that little kid who was like 5 who had shredded abs and chest and whatever, and they were like, oh, his growth was stunted. You know, yeah, they had him doing like Olympic lifts.
They were
and stuff.
training the kid like a bodybuilder. First of all, now that goes to show you that you can lift weights at any age.
Right.
So it's actually perfect that he brought that up because, and again, we're not training kids to be powerlifters. All right, but could you train them to? Yeah. The Russians have been doing it since they're born. So all that stuff, there's no data, there's nothing out there that says that happens because it doesn't happen. But when you're talking about sports specificity, yes.
Performance training,
It's
yeah.
performance training to what you're trying to accomplish.
We see that as,
Right.
as a group because
Right.
of wrestling. So you see what they do with the Ute wrestling.
Right.
So they do all the stuff you're saying. So I'm aware that's great for little kids.
Sure.
But I have a question about growth and stuff.
Right.
I've noticed a lot of wrestlers are short. And someone, saying, I wonder if it stunts their growth or if it's just shorter
I will
kids
comment
are
on
drawn
this.
to
Yeah,
wrestling.
I will comment on this part of it.
I think
Do
Frank
I
wants to
feel
comment
like,
on it too.
No, I'm sorry, I'm gonna go. But I go, it's not the training, it's the weight cutting.
You have
It's the weight
kids
cutting.
it's
Yeah.
fucking nutrition
Yeah, it's
based.
nutrition. It's weight cutting, and that affects kids hormonally.
See,
There's
I
no
want to
doubt
hear
about
this
it.
information 'cause
Yeah.
I'm very curious
Sure.
about this.
So this is my argument that we've brought this up. Forgive me, I forgot his name when we had that youth football coach on. What was
Yes.
the gentleman's
Yeah.
name?
Steve Glyco?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mentioned like at what age did you have kids hitting, so on and so forth. I had to travel to New Canaan an hour
too big.
to play football before high school because the weight limit was 145. I think the last time I was 145 pounds
Was
or
at
less.
birth.
Yeah, pretty much. You can contest to that.
Yeah.
I mean, because at 8th grade I was 6 foot and I was 250 pounds. By freshman year I was 6'2" and I was 315 pounds. So it's just kind of like So it was just kind of like, what do you do? Like you're not going to let this kid put that work in because he's going to have growth issues? No, like my body's operating differently than a normal child my age. But when you're not giving the kid the fuel, like that's why I think like at a certain age, let me rephrase. At such a young age, you have to, in my opinion, give them enough to keep them growing. You can't ask them to sacrifice certain amount that's gonna be a detriment to them developing into a better and stronger athlete. Even and this is my opinion, even at the high school level, I watched our 113-pound wrestler try to stay at 100 or 115 pounds, almost until junior year. That kid shouldn't have been doing that, even in the high school level. He really shouldn't have. And I know my coaches who are great coaches were asking a lot for the kid because they needed top to bottom. But also 115 pounds for a high schooler, like a varsity, why is that even a weight class? So I don't know. I have my personal feelings about it, but also you're in the performance industry. You raise kids. You've helped teach kids. I mean, am I spot on with that? Am I wrong with that?
I was adamantly,
because I had conversations with you about Paulo too. Do you feel like maybe, hey,
he was always behind. So like, gotta remember, my son didn't even speak until almost the age of 3.
Yeah.
So like, there's the thing. He's always, it's gonna have to catch up with him. It takes time. So there was always something there from the beginning. Now he won't shut the fuck up. The point being is,
The Challenger has 472 psi to the wheels.
all right. So my point is
PSI?
that my point is that comes into context. It's relative. So that's why it took so long, regardless of his athletic prowess. It has nothing to do with physical prowess and athletic prowess. You want them to go hand in hand, but sometimes they just
don't always
don't.
do it.
They're not. They will. It's going to take time. And some kids just aren't as blessed, aren't as gifted. Like it's just going to happen. Like I see guys in our collegiate group that weigh 185 pounds that are squatting just as much as the guys that weigh 250. So who of those kids has physical gifts? The kids that weigh 185 pounds. So like it's all relative. Do you understand what I'm saying here? So it's a matter of understanding that and evaluating that, and that's where the disconnect is. That's where the huge disconnect is.
That's an interesting topic,
Yeah.
what you're saying, because
Right.
some coaches, want to win, they don't care.
Right.
And they put everybody on the same program regardless of their
Exactly.
their
I
level.
It goes
of-
back to what I said.
development.
Coaches should not be coaching strength and conditioning. If you're a coach of whatever sport, you do not coach that stuff. You don't know how to do it. You don't.
And it's also an
It's not a-
individualized program. It's not a group.
Listen, you
program.
can have a template to a group, but then you have to be able to break that group down and put them in subgroups.
Right.
Because depending on position, depending on what you're looking for, it's a science, as kind of what you're saying. So, but I'm glad you guys brought that up.
I
Coach
think I
of
did.
X sport is not a coach of strength and conditioning. They may have some base knowledge, but they don't. That's why anyone that has a successful program brings in a strength and conditioning coach.
Yeah.
Because then they can coach the athlete to what they need to do and where they are. Okay?
And they can each focus on their own discipline.
nutritional recommendations, training recommendations, all that type of stuff that comes into it. But again, the major problem that you see with this, and I've come into contact with, is the parents. The parents who have no knowledge, their ego gets in the way, they over-evaluate their child, okay, and say, why not my child, but the other child can? That other child, that other teenager, that other young adult is on a different planet than your child. Your child may get there at one point, but they are not there yet. And it would be detrimental to their progress to try and make them do what the other child with the full beard and six-pack at 8th grade is doing.
Right.
You can't do it. You can't do it. It'd be a form of child abuse, to be perfectly honest with you. You cannot do it. It isn't cookie cutter, like Chris said. Okay, it could be cookie cutter if you had 10 kids with the beard and abs. Then it's cookie cutter. All right, that's
what we're doing.
As a strength coach, I'm happy because I don't have to do much. Because it's all going to work the same way for that group of kids because that's what they are physically. You cannot do that, though. So again, it comes back to people eating a little humble pie, okay, having some confidence in who they're dealing with.
And leaving it up to the experts.
Leaving up the experts, exactly, and letting them adjust it so that you get the best performance out of the athlete, but most importantly, they develop properly throughout the years. That's the most important
Can you
part.
give some advice on weight cutting at a young age? Because we're involved in the wrestling community, all of us, and there's some danger in it.
Yeah,
we don't have a lot of time, but
I am adamantly against it. I did it 1 year for the sake of we had to be honest, that we were forced to, so we can keep our roster strong. It never happened again after that.
Can you just elaborate a little bit, like why? I mean, it's just
Why?
not good
Because
for the kid.
it's not good for the kid. I mean, there's no reason for us to waste any more time on that, and it's a matter. It's not good for them.
It's
and
not-
especially if the kid's smaller. If we talk about smaller athletes, The last thing you want is having your smaller athletes suck weight like that in a period of time. I'd rather lose. I'm
This
not,
is nuts.
and I was guilty of it. We let it happen 1 year and never again.
It's not some 18, 19-year-old young
Right.
man, who I'm asking to dig deeper.
Right.
And search inside what you think is the furthest you can actually stretch yourself. You realize you can stretch yourself a little bit further. Because hey, guess what? I don't know if you guys watch UFC, but even for men who are in their 20s and 30s, it's a problem.
They're getting sick. Some have died.
You know what I mean? So it's
Big
just
weights.
kind of like you're gonna and I know I'm not saying particularly you, but someone who's gonna argue with me that like, oh no, these kids can handle it. Like really? Like and more so, are you some kind of endocrinologist that can sit there and look at me with some kind of specialty understanding of what's happening to that young man's physicality, where you can say, oh, this is not affecting X, Y, Z,
And
or you just
majority of these parents don't even know how to do it properly.
They don't. They don't have to do it properly, and also they make them sustain it for a long period of time. But again, you can't. I think to tie it in, you can't expect a student child athlete to continue to train at a high level, and then not know how to not show them
Not
how to
to
eat
properly,
properly,
yeah.
and then basically starve them and train them down to a bag of bones. And then you want to know why? Hey, they don't get a period anymore. You know, they can't. You know, they lose tremendous amount of weight. They can't put the weight back
Their
on.
strength isn't there when they're
Everything.
actually,
Well,
they
they're
get
eating-
winded.
they're
There's a
eating-
whole bunch of things when
but
you're
they're
cutting
eating-
weight and you're sucked out.
Basically, like
Yeah.
you're at the end of the day, the science behind it is your muscles are mostly glycogen, which is the primary energy source in your body. So what do you think your body does when you start cutting weight? It doesn't eat fat tissue. It eats muscle.
Muscle.
It uses muscle for energy. Fat is like if it's the last thing to keep you alive.
Yeah.
You know, there's a way of rewiring that, but that's a whole nother episode. But the point being is you can't. That's ultimately what it comes down to. So in the grand scheme of it all, when you ask when is the best time for your kid to start lifting weights and training, it's all relative. Today, correct? It is today, but it's
But
relative.
you're doing it differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's different. Depends on who that athlete is in front of me to evaluate and say this is what we can do with he or she now.
One person's doing a wall sit, the other person's got a racked bench, and he's doing squats. They're both working their legs, but they're working it differently.
Don't comment on leg training. Do me a favor, okay? Do not comment.
what's your
Okay.
regimen? 3 pills a day?
My regiment for legs.
3 bags of dicks
I,
a day?
Dunkin' Donuts?
I get up in the morning. I do one of these.
Let me continue,
And I'm
otherwise
done.
we'll waste time.
Well, this-
But yeah, the thing is
Really?
that yeah, really, because it gets out of control.
But if we want to talk pecs,
No, we don't.
Now we're in my realm.
The only time we're going to talk with you is for
red
B's
pigmentation.
and S's.
from here up, baby. From
Yeah.
here up.
Crimson pigmentation. That's when we'll
Yeah.
How long can you suck it in?
That was it, baby.
Belly and stilts. We need advice in that. We'll ask you. So to circle
On that
back,
note-
to circle back and wrap it up, it's relative to the cause, relative to the child. Parents need to keep their mouth shut. They need to educate themselves in the proper coaching and the proper strength and
Or
conditioning
just
coaching,
find somebody
diets.
who's educated.
Just ignore what he said. Following the experts onto what they do and have confidence in those experts and to attain those goals. And most importantly, do not think what's good for Billy is going to be good for Johnny and vice versa. It is all relative. So is it okay to lift weights and exercise and train? Absolutely it is. It will not stunt your growth. You will not, ruin your growth plates. None of that, all that stuff is nonsense BS. There's no literature, there are no studies that say that's going to happen. It doesn't. But proper coaching, proper mentoring, proper diet, proper evaluation, specificity to whatever you're trying to accomplish is what has to be evaluated first.
That's the first thing you got to evaluate.
First evaluation that you have that's what has to be evaluated when you do any of that stuff as it pertains to your student athlete, your youth athlete, et cetera, et cetera.
If you get that, you're good.
So, but with that, we're going to wrap it up. Please ignore everything that BOD said. And Cuzzy Frank, take it away.
Guys, like, share, subscribe. We appreciate all your support. Check us out on Facebook. Check us out on Instagram. Check us out on YouTube. We're
Just
also
check
doing a
us out.
special buy one, get 2 bags of dicks free. Reach out to Mr. Shea. He's got all the details on
You
that.
got my contact info.
For Matt Chat Podcast, I'm Frank Ciato. That's Paul Ciato. Producer extraordinaire, Chris Shea. And
Chris
Ooh,
Shea's
I
a
like
true
that, yeah.
piece of shit.
Chris Shea, sorry.
No,
Shea.
Peter Oberg.
Peter Oberg.
And the BOD.
All I got is
bags of dicks on my mind, Chris. I'll be honest with you.
I gotta be honest.
That's all I got on my mind.
I can tell. I can tell.
And we will revisit the BOD episode, whether the
Maybe
BOD
or
likes
maybe
it or
not.
not.
Match Podcast, guys, we're out. Thanks.
Kirk out, son.